how did you find what you do now as your calling?
So I was actually explaining this earlier, but I work with women's narratives. I believe that the stories that we tell define us, they identify us. So, you know, if you tell stories of what you expect a good woman to be, the silent kind, the one who won't fight back, then that's what you've created as the identity of the good woman.
Yes.
And when you tell stories of how somebody fights back, then they've become the bad woman. So you set identity, establish identity through the stories that we tell. And I found over a period of time that we never ever told stories of a woman's right to her own body. Yes. It was always somebody else's property.
Yes.
Her pleasure was somebody else's decision to make. And so that's where I actually started. I went off to look for the stories that we had silenced, because it's not just the stories that we tell, but equally the stories that we silence. And I went looking for those, and of course that led me to the body of work that I started to explore. I didn't think it was going to be this long. I thought I would do a little paper of about 5,000 words and we'd have moved on from there and everything would be fine. But I've now been in my work in this field for about 19 years.
Yes.
And I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. It's just incredible.
And is that from tradition? Is it from a certain type of culture? Where do you believe that where's the blockage?
Where's the blockage? So that's the million-dollar question. I think everybody wants to know what happened. So it's interesting, Tracy, but according to research, 325 AD is when the very first ecumenical council of the Catholic Church is set up. And from the time they set up, they start talking about how bad the body is, how sinful it is. You know, it's a viewpoint that's been expressed by many a culture. At the exact same time, I mean, you know, sex was fine so long as it was for having children.
Reproduction, to survive, but not actually for yourself.
Not for pleasure, it wasn't. So much so that by 342 AD, they've passed their first written law banning oral sex and anal sex, because there's nothing reproductive about it.
Yeah,
you know,
so to them it's a waste. But actually that's part of who you are as a person.
It is, but that was not considered something good to be doing. And at the very same time, coincidentally, across the oceans on the banks of the river Ganges, the sage Vatsayana is sitting there writing the Karma Sutra, talking about how beautiful the body is, and it's the path to heaven, and pleasure is the path to heaven, particularly the pleasure of a woman. And the two viewpoints kind of grew, and we all got stuck in this little twilight zone somewhere in between.
Yes.
And I think that's where the tension still is.
And do you find then in the work that you face criticism for talking about
I think I've realized that it didn't matter. It doesn't matter what you talk about on social media, you would face criticism. If I was to go out one day and say the sky is blue, I'd get told off for that.
Yeah, they tell you.
So it's like, no, how dare you say it's blue? Not everything in life is blue, you know. But anyway, yes, I do face a certain amount of criticism. The upside is it's maybe 5%, maybe 3% of the people who write in. The others give you so much love that it makes it worth doing.
Yes, and it's very uplifting to hear that actually you are opening minds and you are showing people who have maybe been silenced that there is another way and you're allowed to be you.
And also, you know, I just think that desire, pleasure, arousal, attraction is so much a part of us. I mean, it's so natural. It's so intrinsic to us.
It's not a sin.
It's not. And yet, if you've been brought up to believe that it's bad, just think how it plays with your mind, how it screws with your mind. Because you know, you feel it, and then you tell yourself off. You know, because you're
something is wrong with you.
Yeah,
feeling
I shouldn't be doing this. I'm wrong. And we've just sort of we've messed up people's minds and lives to an extent that we cannot even begin to imagine, just by denying them something that's so natural.
And I think as well, if you deny a part of you, whether it's a small part or a big part, you do lose yourself. And you know, you're these beautiful colours and life and soul, and to put that in a box and confine it, I think it's a crime. You know, we have this life to be ourselves and to be uplifting and loving and human. And I think so many people have their light extinguished or completely removed.
And you know, I think what's fascinating, so my work is primarily focused on the erotic literatures of ancient India as opposed to the rest of the world.
Yes.
Because I discovered that that was possibly the only ancient culture that talked about the pleasure of women to this extent.
Yes.
And to me, that's just mind-blowingly wonderful that, you know, it's just so different to what everybody else preached. And it at no point does it sort of say, well, okay, now, you know, so-and-so spent this much time pleasuring you, get on with it. There is no such thing. It is entirely dependent on your pleasure, because when you feel that pleasure inside you, you become productive.
Yes.
And so much so that, you know, we have, which lost again, but in ancient India, we had up to 30 love festivals.
Goodness.
Yes, so as opposed to one Valentine's Day, we've got 30 love festivals. And they take place at different times of the year. Most of them are in springtime.
Yes.
But you have some in the monsoon, you have them in the autumn, etc. And the idea was that, you know, you go back to, I don't know, the 5th century. And through the entire world, there seems to be a lot of famine, there are a lot of floods, there's a lot of natural disasters. In Europe, they're being told that it's because of the unbridled lust of
the sin has caused that.
Yes, absolutely. In India, they actually believed in ancient India, which I've just discovered as part of the research on my new book, because in India, of course, you know, I knew the stories that, you know, when the famines came and when the floods came, they would have love festivals to try and get over that.
To turn it round.
To turn it around. And the reason for that is that, you know, when Mother Earth gets really, really angry and she's lost the joy of her inner life and pleasure, it's about bringing her back to that joyousness.
Oh, I love it. You've given me goosebumps.
It's such a gorgeous idea that you actually bring her back to realizing that she's happy and that she wants the pleasure and she wants the joy.
It's part of life and you shouldn't deny that part of it.
And it's only when she gets to that point will it then filter down to the human being. So as human beings, you bring her around to that idea of thinking, and then it filters back down to the humans. And I just think, I love that idea.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And as well, like, I was raised in a very strict Catholic family. So my upbringing was to have ankles covered, to have the neck and the arms covered, and very religious in church. And I found myself drawn to a completely different way of life, to Buddhism. That was something that really called to me before I even understood what Buddhism was. So do you feel, in a sense, that you had this calling to step outside the normal tradition of what is seen as acceptable when you look at pleasure, when you look at female empowerment?
Definitely. Like I said, you know, for me, it's always been about the stories. It's always been about what motivates us to act a certain way. Because I also believe that the words that we use define our actions. So, you know, it was a case of stepping out to see, well, what are these stories and why have they been silenced? And then as you start going to them, you discover more about yourself. You understand yourself. And you become almost like a calmer, better person, because you're putting to rest all those demons that have bothered you for years. That have actually been at your back saying, you're doing the wrong thing, this is bad, you know, etc., etc. And suddenly those demons go to rest because it's not a bad thing.
No, and you were born to be yourself.
Yes.
I think that's beautiful. I love that. And where do you feel that your journey will take you?
You know what? I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea where it's going to take me, but I made a promise to myself that I will literally follow the story. So whichever one opens up, I go and explore the story, whatever. And I can sometimes, literally, I will read a sentence. Like I said, it was very recently I came across a paper about understanding how to bring Mother Nature back to her pleasure. And I will stop reading at that point and literally just marinate that idea, because it's just so amazing. It's like letting it kind of settle into your system
and become a part of you, and
yeah.
to feel that and live that and share that to others.
Because that's the only way you can share it, is if you
yes.
can actually live it.
Yes, yes. And I don't think many people in this day and age are capable of seeing outside of the life that they've known.
Yeah.
And the life that they're told by perhaps previous generations or society. If there's a taboo to say, you know, you can't go against what you're told. But actually, I think the most beauty is found in life when you step outside of those limits and those boundaries, and you find yourself.
You understand yourself. You
Yeah.
understand why you think a certain way and why you feel a certain way. Because we all do feel a particular way about so many things. And either we close it down because it's not the right thing, or you tell yourself off for feeling like that, or you think you're the only one who's feeling like that. And then you rebel and go just the whole way across because you're like, well, nobody else feels like this. It's clearly just me. And hence, I'm going to go and do this. And if we could just realize that we all feel that way, we'd also come together to support each other.
Yes, and I think it's a case of being your true self and sharing sooner rather than later. You know, sometimes it took me almost 30 years to even accept my appearance, let alone my thoughts and my interests in life, the things that I love and hold dear, just because nobody around me felt the same way. And
or we thought they didn't feel the same.
Yeah, and that silence doesn't help anybody. Just keeping
I think
it
silence is actually the worst thing, because that perpetuates the abuse, it perpetuates the violence, it perpetuates literally, well, it perpetuates the control that's been put upon us.
Yes, and the fear of it as well, the fear of change and the unknown.
Yeah.
But I think the more, like how you speak so openly, it's so refreshing, and I think the lives that you've changed from giving that voice, and you know what we all think inside but are too scared to say, to be able to say it's okay, you're not the only one, that is life-changing. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you.
Just that openness and love, and you've inspired me enormously.
Oh, Tracy, thank you. I think that deserves an on-camera hug.
Thank you. So do you have advice for somebody who struggles to be themselves, to feel themselves?
I know that it's just words, and I know that it's easier said than done, but you know, most of our problems are here in our head, because we've kind of blocked off those channels of our brain, and we won't let ourselves think about certain things. And the only thing that I always say is that the next time your brain, your mind goes in a certain direction, let it. Just let it.
Just explore.
Don't stop yourself. It's only inside your own mind. Just let it think and see where it takes you, because you have no idea where it's taking you.
Yeah, and I think just understanding yourself.
That's the first way to understand yourself.
Thank you so much. I've absolutely loved this. Is there anything else that you would like to share, or points that you'd like to touch on?
No, I just think that you know, we've been told for generations, for millennia, that there is a certain place for women. That's where they should exist, and to be accepted as the right kind of woman, that's where you should be. And it's not a narrative that was created by women. No, it was created by somebody else. So
why live up to that? Why try to fit into that? Yeah, just be yourself, and I suppose the right person will love you for who you are, not who you would pretend to be or try to become.
There will definitely be somebody who will love you, but when you stay within that sort of box that's been created for us, you don't ever give yourself the chance to be you in the full sense of you.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, and just such uplifting words that everybody can take away with them, I think. It's just a hug, isn't it? It's that feeling of just be yourself and live your life as an individual. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you.